On April 7th, 1992, an explosion rocked the tiny town of Wesley, Texas, about 10 miles outside of Brenham. On that date, 3 people lost their lives. Many hundreds of people were affected by this tremendous explosion, and we're here today to talk to a survivor, a man who lived through it and has a story to tell.
What it was a storage facility for liquefied petroleum gas. It's 2,000 feet below the ground. So who would have figured the gas was coming out of this thing? It's down so deep in the ground. I saw the cloud. It was at least a half a mile long. They said there was 35,000 barrels of liquefied petroleum gas on the ground when it touched off. The fog at that time, there was woods up behind my house, and you could barely see the tops of the trees, so I'm thinking the cloud was 30 to 40 feet deep, and a half mile long, and I don't know, a couple football fields in width. It was a typical Tuesday morning. I was up around 5, long before daylight, loading the truck, getting ready to go to work. Supposed to meet my crew sometime around 8 o'clock. We were putting stained glass windows in a church. I had just finished loading the truck. I remember walking out of the shop and looking out over the hills, out behind my house, and I noticed it was really, really foggy that morning. I was sort of astonished by how dense the fog was, as a matter of fact. And I remember telling myself, be careful, the idiots are going to be running 80 mile an hour in the fog down here. I watch that, somebody run me over in the, you couldn't see 10 feet. Gotten off into my truck, started the truck up, and the windows were fogged because I'd had the driver's side window down through the night. And just as I reached to turn the defrosters on, it felt like somebody hit me with a baseball bat in the side of the head. It was a huge bang. I remember it just flattened me, knocked me flat on the seat of the truck and held me down. As I looked up towards the window, a flame shot into the truck. The flame came in the window and then just sucked back out. I watched it go back out the window, and it was pinned to the seat. And all of a sudden everything went black, and my windshield just shattered. All this debris hit the windshield. And the rear window plopped out of its hole right down on me, and then sort of everything calmed down and the daylight came back. And all I was thinking is my truck blew up. So I grabbed the steering wheel and pulled myself up, just shut the truck off. I thought, got to get the ignition off. And I turned and looked up at where my house was, and then I noticed that the house was just shattered. Everything, everything was in the yard. The roof was gone. The pieces of it were laying all over the place. And I thought, my house blew up. I couldn't get out of the truck, so I hit it with my shoulder. Still couldn't get out, so I just laid down and kicked it open. Kicked the door open in the truck. I got it open and ran up into the house. As I got through the front door, where the front door was gone. I went to the stairwell, and the stairwell was just a pile of drywall. You couldn't see the steps anymore. The house was, everything was gone. It was all over the place. Insulation hanging everywhere, furniture just disheveled and broken. And I could hear my daughter crying in the second floor. So as I topped what would have been the stairway, I looked across towards our master bedroom, and I saw my wife's hands. She was pushing debris off and screaming, "Somebody get my baby, somebody get my baby." And I turned towards Meredith's room, and it was just a pile of debris. I couldn't even see the crib. Everything, the door had fallen in, the roof had collapsed on it. It was all drywall and insulation again. And then, you hear about people, you just get that incredible boost of strength. I grabbed the whole pile of stuff and just threw it off the crib, just in one fell swoop, gone. And got down to her, and she was covered in sheets of glass. The doorway that the frame, I had transom doors and had fallen on the crib first, and all the glass came out, was laying on her neck, and she had a cut in her forehead and the knee. But she was laying really still, sort of crying, but, just in shock, just laying still.
Yeah.
But I pulled all the glass off of her, thinking about, I'll get her out of the house, and then I'll come back for my wife. Because I thought she was just buried under rubble. You could see through the house. There was no walls left. All I could see was this stuff piled everywhere. And our bedroom was one of the worst. It was everything from the attic had all collapsed down into the bedroom. But by the time I got married, all the glass off of her and checked her for broken bones and cuts that were bleeding, I picked her up, and my wife put her hand on my shoulder. And I was shocked. I said, okay, you climb on my back. I said, we're going to get us all out of this house before it falls down. So she had literally climbed up on my back. I had the baby in my arms, grabbed her, and walked down the steps, took them out the front door, and we stopped. All of us just shaking all over. Yeah, my wife, I never saw anybody shake. She was just vibrating. And Meredith and her both, Meredith clinging to her and crying. And I turned around and looked, and across the valley, up on the hill where the pipeline company was, were these two huge flames. I mean, just like flamethrowers shooting up into the air, just and a roar from the fire. Just just all you could hear. So I went down the hill, got to the bottom of the hill, and my neighbor's wife was outside, and she yelled, "We're out of the house," which is good. I really didn't know what to do at that point. I was still in a bit of a daze. And I heard a woman yell from further down the road that I'm hurt. I'm in this car. I can't get out. So I went down the hill to the car. This one was Gloria Diver, as I found out later. It was a mother, a daughter, and a 6-year-old boy were in the car. The daughter grabbed the 6-year-old boy, was up at my neighbor's house. And my neighbor, she was a nurse, so she was already tending to their wounds. But Miss Diver was still sitting in the driver's seat of the car. The car was covered with limbs, anywhere from 6 to 8 inches in diameter, all burned. Everything was burned black. And I forced what I could off of the car and out of the way so that I could get the door open. And what bothers me most to this day was there was a woman sitting there, all of her clothes burned off. The seat belt was melted into her shoulder, down across her waist, melted into her body, burned into her. She was holding her hands up, and there was skin hanging like gloves from her hands. There was loose skin all over her body. All of this was just like peeled away. There was lymph running from her nose, eyes, and ears, and her hair was burned to maybe 1/4 of an inch in bright orange. And she just was shaking and looking, and I looking at me and says, I don't know what happened. I said, well, you've been in an explosion. I'm going to try and help you get out of the car. I didn't want to touch her. I said, I can't touch you.
Sure.
I knew that a burn victim you didn't want to mess with. I could have done more damage than good. So I cut the rest of the belt away so that she could turn in the seat and get ready for when the ambulance or somebody got down there to help us. And that seemed to take an hour.
Did you have a knife with you?
Yeah, I always carried a knife. I was construction. I had a razor knife in my pocket, so I pulled it out and cut everything loose. And I said, we're going to have to wait. I said, I can't do anything with you right now. I could hear ambulances. I could hear police. They were working their way down to us. I know that it took them probably 20 or 30 minutes to assess what the problem was and if there was any more danger before they'd let anybody in. And I looked behind me, and 2 young firemen had just walked in from behind. And they just stopped and stared up the hill, and just in shock. They didn't know what to do. And I said, listen, you guys got to help me clear the limbs off this car so we can get her ready to go into the ambulance. I talked to Gloria Diver, and her last words to me at time, she just looked me in the eye and said, "I hurt all over." And those words haunted me for a long, long time after the explosion. That's all she could do. There was nothing I could do. I never felt more helpless in my entire life.
Did she survive?
No, she didn't. They died 7 days later. Both the women died 7 days out from their burns afterwards. They were in the heat, the hottest part of the explosion. What I understand is that car is what set off, or I believe that's the car that set off the gas. Mm-hmm. And I went up towards my neighbor's house to go see how they were doing. And I got there, and their 3 kids were standing there, and every one of them's bleeding. Forehead, elbows, knees, just glass cuts everywhere. So we stood there for a few minutes talking, and her husband was being loaded into an ambulance. He had a cut down his back. They said his body imprint was in one of their vehicles. Two vehicles were bumped together, and he was in between them.
Oh.
So he was cut, but he was conscious, and we were standing there talking, and I said, we've got to get these kids out of here. The mom and the 3 kids. And I turned around, and there was a truck sitting behind me, keys in it, and I yelled, "Hey, I'm taking this truck, taking these kids to the hospital. I'm getting out of here. We're going to get these kids out of this." And found my wife. And she had a broken clavicle. She was bruised from head to toe. We had a large armoire that was on the west side of the house, and when the explosion went off, the armoire just flattened her, went right through, and it was on outside the house, about 50 feet away. It went right through the back wall, and laying in pieces in the yard. So it just knocked her flat. See, otherwise was okay. They didn't put a cast or anything on it. They just said she'll recover. It was a crack. Meredith was okay, and after about 20 minutes of standing around talking, everybody sort of noticed. I said, I really can't hear what anybody's saying. I'm missing half of what's going on here. So they did an evaluation on me. That I'd lost, probably 80% of my hearing in one ear. The ring is still in my head to this day. This is 20 years later. I live with this constant ring that's in my ear from this. So it probably, I'll never get any that high-end hearing back.
Did you lose any of your hearing?
A good bit of the high end. To a certain point, I can hear, and then after that, I can't. It drives my wife crazy because if you don't, you'll look at me when you talk to me. If somebody tries to talk to me from behind. I miss half of it. A lot of times can't hear a thing that they're saying. So, we spent I spent one night at my father-in-law's place with my wife. We didn't sleep. There was the whole night just discussing what had happened, what we were going to do. We didn't have clothes, furniture, anything. Everything was gone in an instant.
And before we started taping, you mentioned to me that you actually built that house.
Yes, I did.
That was not a house you just bought off the line.
It took me 2 years to put it together. Yeah.
Which you lost.
Yeah, all that was gone. And in an instant, I lost the house. The truck that I was sitting in was totaled. The truck saved my life. If I hadn't been in the truck, if I'd have been walking around outside, still loading equipment, at the time that went off, I would have probably been as badly burned as the women.
Yeah.
The fire was all up on the hillside, so the truck saved my life. My shop was leveled. I lost a work trailer, 2 vehicles, and the house was just shattered. We didn't have a thing left after it was.
But when they moved in and you got your tour, they told you it was completely safe.
Oh, yeah, it was fully automated. It was all controlled from Oklahoma. That morning, as a matter of fact, there were guys trying to get to the facility. Warning lights had come off. It set off alarms all over in Oklahoma. They were sending people there to shut the thing down. that young man, he stopped the school bus and was on the yard trying to turn a valve off when it went off. It broke his arm, but he was
A company man.
the company guy was out there trying to shut things off, and he got caught up in the explosion himself and broke his arm. You know, like I said, broke his arm, but he survived it. He said he got down on his face. I didn't sleep right for about 8, 9 months. But I was finally, you know, I went to a lot of psychiatrists and psychologists. Everybody was, you know, we were told you need to go get counseling, you know, to deal with it and such. And I was diagnosed with post-traumatic distress syndrome. And I was pretty angry. What I noticed before the explosion was a lot of trucks going up and down the road hauling off more brine. And over the time, I thought that what it was is they were in the process of making this thing bigger than their permit allowed. They were at a 150,000 barrel permit. They had 350,000 barrels in the hole that morning. So they were already working beyond their permit, and they were making this thing bigger and bigger to more profit, more money. And what I think happened is the safety systems, every once in a while they'd get a little bit of gas, would snipe up the pipe and shut the whole thing down. So somebody turned that system off because of, you know, they were trying to make it bigger, and they, you know, and it was just being bothersome. And that's what in my opinion, the way I felt it was, it was economics over safety. Mm-hmm. There was no regard for the human life that was out there. It was all about making money. Yeah, that's what bothered me the most. Over time, you know, I was a general contractor. I worked in business. I was a businessman for a long time. I have been. I'm still in business, but I'm much smaller now. I lost my whole, through the process, lost my whole want to be in business, because if being in business meant putting business before human life, I didn't want any part of it. So, you know, that's one of the side effects of this whole thing. How it, you know, what the biggest change in my life.
Mm-hmm. You haven't seen the damage? I'd like you to come to my house.
I'm anxious to get out there. And one of the things I'd like to tell you and your neighbors, and one of the reasons I'm here is regardless of the responsibility, we feel that we want to do as much as we can to help.
Did any of the executives from the company ever contact you?
No, they never said they were sorry.
Nothing?
No, I never saw one of them. Nobody ever came by and said, are you all right? It was all handled by lawyers. You know,
Would that have made a difference?
I really thought for a long time, why don't they just come say they're sorry? You know, we're sorry, you know, that it happened. That bothered me a lot. That nobody had the guts to come up and say, well, we made a mistake. You know, are you all right? Can we help you in any way? There was nothing. All the help we got was from Red Cross. The fellowship here in Brenham, they give us some money to go out and buy clothes and get a few things and get started again. But nothing ever came out of the companies. The whole NTSB hearing basically was for them trying to get $1 million permit to reopen the thing again. And there were 300 of us from the area that had been blown up that were there demanding that they were not given another permit, that we didn't want that facility up there anymore. And the NTSB finally ruled in our favor, and they concreted that thing in. Now all it is a pumping facility. It's
not a storage facility.
No, the storage facility's been shut down. They won't let them do it anymore. We wouldn't let it. We didn't want it. We didn't want it in our community. I was going to try and rebuild that house. You know, 6 months or so later, I said, you know, I can't live out there again. Mm-hmm. It just was scary. I got dreams of my daughter running around in this beautiful pasture with all the blue bonnets, and then the whole thing turns into fire. Yeah, and I couldn't move back out there, couldn't live there again. So. There was a woman, a couple that lived behind the facility. I didn't mention this part. She was in a body cast, at the time had a back problem. They lived in a trailer. Her and her 5-year-old son were in the trailer. Her 5-year-old son was one of the people that was killed, one of the 3 that died. The trailer was just dust. I mean, there was nothing left of it. The pictures I've seen of it, all you could see were the wheels and axles from underneath the trailer. The rest of it was gone. She had both of her arms blown off, and her legs and feet were disconnected. She came up and did a testimony in front of the NTSB.
She was still alive.
She's still alive. She's had a lot of surgeries, from what I understand. I haven't seen her in years, but both elbows were locked up, and she actually walked in, which was amazing. Still in a body cast. It did not done anything to her face. She said she was happy about that. But her testimony at the NTSB is what, that's when they said, no, we're not going to grant another permit. We're going to shut this down at that time. I ended up on antidepressants for 2 years. And that took, when I finally said I'd had enough, because I really wasn't doing anything. I really quit working. I was sitting around the house. People said I was a cocaine addict, and I was just buried myself in the house. I wasn't doing anything. I stopped working. And finally, I said, well, I got to get back to work. This is ridiculous. I can't live like this anymore. It took me about 6 months to wean myself from the antidepressants and get away from them. But I did it. I cleaned myself. I didn't want to be on them forever.
And you were seeing, for a while, you were seeing some mental health professionals?
Yeah, it took me 5 counselors to find one that would talk to me without being on antidepressants. I was angry, of course. Ended up in a divorce, gave up God, going to church. I mean, nothing was right for me at all.
For quite some time?
Well, many. I just now, a year ago, accepted Christ back into my life again. Mm-hmm. And it was a big step for me. I was very... I looked at it, these people called themselves Christians, and look what they did to all these families and other people just for dollars, At one point, I actually contemplated sitting on my hillside with a 30-06 in the scope and shooting anybody across the other side of the hill. And a year or so ago, if you'd asked me what do you feel about these people, if I ever saw one of them, I'd strangle them right here on the spot. If I saw one of their lawyers, it'd be on, But now, okay, I can't be like that. And that just festers inside of you. So since I've found God again and accepted the fact that I have to forgive them for my own soul's peace. Mm-hmm. And I found now much more, I'm much happier. I don't have that anger built up inside me anymore. I don't contemplate it. I don't think about it anymore as much anymore.
So what changed for you?
Well, I started riding motorcycles again. I started playing music. I got out from running large jobs as a general contractor to just working with wood again, being a woodworker. Downsized everything that I've got. I still, my philosophy is to do excellent work in wood. It's not about money. It's not about, I'm not going to get rich at what I'm doing. But I make a decent living and I make people happy. My life was going along at one path, and it just, bam, it's different. But now I look back and I look where I am, what I'm doing. I wouldn't have my son. I wouldn't be in the church that I'm at. I wouldn't be riding motorcycles again with Tribe of Judah. I wouldn't be playing music. There were a lot, I would be doing something else. So maybe God put me on a better path. Who's to say? I don't regret where I am but it's different than what I had in mind. It's not what I had in mind. Right now, before that explosion, by now I'd have a big company and I'd be building $1 million projects one after the next after the next. That's where my goal was at that time. Doing big, big projects. Running a big company. Lots of employees. Now I just want to get as small as I possibly can. You know?
And do beautiful work, which I've seen.
And be creative. Again, it's not going to get me rich. I'll work till I die, but I'm happier for it now. So,
that's wonderful.
It's been a long road to get here. A lot of bumps to do it, but looking back, now at what I've got, it's good. It's good.